Hello, and welcome to Color Me Your Pride, an evening with Latinx artists. My name is PJ Motenpool, Senior Manager of External Affairs with ViiV Healthcare. We are excited that you all have decided to join us this evening as we celebrate the close of National Hispanic Heritage Month and commemorate National Latinx HIV and AIDS Awareness Day. Additionally, we are super excited to celebrate the one-year anniversary of the release of Tal Como Soy, Here As I Am, a report that was developed as a result of a 10-month listening tour across the US and Puerto Rico. And it also helped shape our Positive Action for Latinx Men initiative. Positive Action for Latinx Men is ViiV Healthcare's funding initiative that specifically focuses on providing funding support for community-centered solutions for Latinx, gay, bisexual, and trans men across the US and Puerto Rico. We're happy to share that ViiV has committed over $4 million to support this community over the next 5 years. To find out more about Positive Action for Latinx Men, please visit our website. One of the things that was clearly evident with our listening tour is that arts and culture play a pivotal role in uplifting social concerns, including the work that it takes to combat HIV. Tonight, you'll laugh, you might cry, and you'll experience a range of emotions as our featured artists truly illustrate what it means to share heart through art. You'll get to witness a range of art, from spoken word to visual art and even dance. And we're also happy to share that we have a special tribute to our friend Marco Castro Bojorquez, a fearless pioneer in the HIV movement who passed away earlier this year. Now, without further ado, please welcome tonight's co-hosts, Jesus Valles and Yosimar Reyes.
Muchas gracias, PJ. Thank you so much for having us here. My name is Yosimar Reyes, and I'm super excited to be your co-host for tonight's event.
I'm Jesus Valles, and I will be co-hosting with Yosimar, and we're really excited to be here and to engage in conversation with one another, to share space with the incredible artists that we have as part of the lineup tonight. And I think to continue so many of the conversations that have been really kind of born out of the Here As I Am report that you mentioned earlier, PJ. So we're really excited to host this evening for you all.
And before we get started, we also want to acknowledge that over the past 2 years, we've kind of been facing a lot of understandings, new awakenings, and reckonings in this country. And I think out of those understandings is that we have come to the conclusion that events like this are super significant, and why we decided to format this event in the way that it is, inviting artists who are doing amazing work in documenting the histories of queer Latinx people in this country.
I think similarly, we also really wanted to invite artists who we believe have been having really frank and unafraid conversations about queerness and about the body, about what it means to be a Latinx person living in the United States in this particular time, and also in a continuum of history where stigma, anti-immigrant sentiment, xenophobia, and homophobia constantly sort of like haunt our conversations. And yet, despite that, so many of the artists that we are featuring here tonight and who we're paying tribute to as well have continuously done their part to battle these particular stigmas and create art that not only sparks conversations, yes, but also helps to build larger communities, which I think is something that so many of us have returned to over the last 2 years, about how it is that we find and bring together community as a way to respond to, yes, the pandemic, but also sort of the ongoing challenges that we continue to face.
Tonight's event is a love letter to the world we envision. These artists are giving us blueprints to the worlds we want to manifest, and we really want to highlight that. I think dreaming and manifesting those worlds are super important. So we are super excited that these artists are here with us. Before we get started, we would collectively like to dedicate tonight's performance to a person who has been symbolic and has definitely done a lot of the work in kind of paving the way for this kind of work to exist. We would like to dedicate tonight's showcase to the memory of Marco Castro Bojorquez. Marco, a human rights activist and filmmaker, leaves a legacy of bridging art and advocacy. His films, Tres Gotas de Agua y El Canto de Colibrí, capture the nuanced experience of Latinx LGBT people and their families. As a fierce champion for the rights of HIV-positive Latinx people, Marco leaves a void in the lives of those of us who had the joy of knowing him. Te extrañamos, amigo, and I hope that the day we meet again, we dance, we laugh, and celebrate the impact you had in all our lives. Te queremos, Marco, and we dedicate tonight's showcase to you.
So in the spirit of that particular kinship and impact, we're going to get our evening started. So many of the artists that we have here for you tonight really embody what it means to do the work of community and really echo what Toni Morrison tells us about difficult times, which is these are the times when artists get to work. As mentioned earlier by PJ, much of tonight's work is born from the findings in the Tal Como Soy, Here As I Am report, which tells us that Latinx men stand at a different crossroads between government neglect, poverty, community stigma, migration anxiety, the legacy of machismo as they attempt to care for themselves. So as a result, the Here As I Am report tells us that we are desperately in need of community-led solutions that prioritize the specific needs of Latinx men. And tonight we're gonna open with an artist and my co-host who I have always believed to sort of really like walk the walk and talk the talk. In a lot of ways, Yosimar Reyes, who is our first performer for the night, embodies what it means to actually show up for communities and to not just talk about it, but to be about it, to put the body on the line, to raise money for community, to say the things that we are afraid to say. And I think, especially for me, as somebody who's an emerging writer, Yosimar was always kind of a North Star. So I would love to now invite Yosimar Reyes, who is the closest I'll ever come to meeting Niurka Marcos, to share a poem. So Yosimar, if you could tell us a little bit about your practice and what you'll be sharing with us tonight.
Thank you, Jesus. Yes, I am a poet and a writer. And the poem that I wanted to share tonight is a love poem. I love love. And I think this is the thing that gives me hope. This poem was written for another queer person, a brother of mine who kind of taught me the significance and the importance of celebrating queerness, of uplifting it, of basking in it, and really seeing my queerness as a gift, as this, a gift that is, divinely orchestrated. So this poem is titled Trey, My Revolutionary, and it goes like this. You tell me you don't like the city, that these buildings, this concrete numbs the senses, cages the spirit, and baby, your spirit was meant to be free. You, my love, were born to be revolutionary. Free like the winds you felt sitting on top of the world, free like the tobacco you offered to blow blessings free, like palabras sagradas que salen de tu boca y las rimas femeninas y masculinas that you buzz here on stage. You are my revolutionary, not a guerrero, but a healer, because in times of conflict, mi rey, you heal. And more than body, I must agree with you that you are spirit, because more than your flesh, I'm in love con el corazón que tienes. You are the reason why I love men with noble hearts, the reason why I don't mind sharing a bed with someone. For men like you, I will ride a million BARTs, get lost in Oakland, and find your house beneath the brightest star. Mi vida, you come from tierra, where the spirits of those who fail to cross over Rome. You come from el desierto, but baby, we all know you are not deserted. You got me, and together we are four spirits, like the four directions. You have the creator behind you. You're his creation, his masterpiece. And in this journey you are traveling, you have managed to leave your footprints in my heart. I carry your breath in my hair, your teachings in my two-spirit. You are fluid, como los ríos que nuestra gente ha cruzado. You remind me that the only possessions we have in this world are our bodies and our voice. And the combination of the two must be used to honor the spirits of los antepasados. This life is a ritual, and in its sacredness, I'm so glad I'm able to hug you. You are my revolutionary. And as you make your transition back home into the arms of your mother, into the lips of your father, I ask that you take this poem with you. I ask that you take a memory of me with you. Plant these en la tierra que te vio nacer, en esa tierra que ha sido bautizada con la sangre sagrada de nuestra gente. And I will assure you that wherever you be, this love was brought on you. Como el sol por las mañanas, this poem will shine on you. Now go to wherever home is, knowing that in San Jose, you leave a brown boy that has nothing but love and respect for you. In the meantime, I will stay here in this cage, in this city, singing and singing till the system crumbles, till borders break, till the earth shakes and our people become awake. I will be here singing and singing to the day we're all free to return home.
Oof, I thank you so much, Yosimar. Like, I love that poem. I think it's just it feels like such a beautiful gift, and I think just like that idea of love and what it means to really sort of like give someone a piece of your spirit via the word and via performance, I think feels like such a you thing. There's just something about you when you perform that always feels so like sincere and divine and also so personable and passionate. And so like I'm so thankful and so honored that you're here with us tonight. And I would love to just hear a little bit more about your practice and about what some of the themes that we're exploring tonight might mean to you.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things, I started writing poetry when I was 16 years old. And at the time, I was coming to a lot of realizations. I'm growing up in extreme poverty. I am queer. I'm undocumented. And really facing these things of the idea that my story was one of deficit. Like I constantly felt like, wow, I'm up against so much adversity. How is it that I'm going to be able to face the world if I can't build my spirit? And that's how I started writing poetry. I started writing poems about things that I was embarrassed about, things that I felt shame about, things that didn't belong to me. And so I think I always talk about writing being a process of me trying to get rid of shame or la vergüenza that I think a lot of us as LGBT queer immigrants are up against. And I think that was through love. And now I feel that I'm definitely not that 16-year-old anymore. And now I celebrate it. And I think events like this and being able to be showcased next to artists like yourself and the artists that we are about to witness is that reminder, right? That at one point we all kind of felt lost, and some of us are still lost. But what we have is this kind of artwork and these practices that help us, shine a little light every step that we do take in the confusion that it is life.
So throughout the course of the evening, we'll be returning to the Here As I Am, Tal Como Soy report to talk about some of the themes that we see reflected in the report as they live inside of the artistry that we'll be sharing with you tonight by these incredible artists. And one of the findings that we really wanted to focus on and talk about was the idea of family and community, and the way that these two concepts, and family and community in whatever iteration they appear and however we choose to make them, are deeply, deeply important and central to the lives and identities, the health and the wellness of Latinx folks living here and who are having to sort of like face obstacles every day. In many ways, chosen families provide a really essential connection and become a source for resilience and love for so many Latinx folks in the US. And so to this end, we'd love to invite our next artist, who will be introduced to you by Yosimar.
We're super excited to have Dorian Wood joining us tonight. Dorian Wood is a multidisciplinary artist based in Los Angeles, using subject matter informed by their own perspective as a non-binary brown person, a child of Costa Rican and Nicaraguan immigrants. Dorian's work is born from a desire to challenge traditions and systems that have contributed to the marginalization of people. We are super excited that Dorian is with us tonight, sharing their amazing work. And yes, Dorian.
Thank you so much, Yossi. Thank you so much, Jesus. It is such an honor to be here in this space with you. Thank you for seeing our work and just actually addressing something you mentioned earlier, Yossi, as far as the idea that we at times as LGBTQ artists and individuals can feel lost. I feel that even speaks to what Jesus mentioned regarding the idea of family and how many of us may feel lost when we have to leave our birth families in order to find our own, just actual created, accepted, found families. And even in that trajectory, in our own loss and how that can be relative and how that can be intermittent, I think what's really wonderful as creators is that even in our own loss, we leave a trail, and we leave a trail of possibility. We leave a trail of experience, of trauma that we are brave enough to reveal to the world as we're processing it. And that to me is something that has guided my practice for a very long time, where it is at times feeling lost, at times feeling like I don't know exactly where I stand, who I am, and thus my own identity in its fluidity has at times become a place of uncertainty, but in recent history, it really is this guiding light and one that propels me to keep moving forward. And even when I do feel uncertain at times, that becomes part of the creative process. And I feel extremely fortunate that I can see life and see my own journey in that way. I think as far as how it relates to Latinx men, as someone who many times tends to be misgendered by our communities and beyond, I accept that. And I also know that in my own accepting and embracing of my own individuality as a non-binary femme person, I'm also demonstrating a life of possibility. And I then accept my responsibility as being a vessel for possibility. And that does come through in my work, and I aim to have it come through as much as possible in my work so it can be a point of conversation, but also something that can spark a specific conversation within people's selves, within the selves of Latinx men who, just like really anyone who identifies as a man in this world can feel like they are in a cage of obligation, of having to seem a certain way, of having to represent a family, of having to represent a community as something that is stereotypically seen as a natural born leader simply because how you identify in a binary construct. This short film I co-directed with my colleague Graham Colbeans is titled Baisa. And Baisa was actually inspired by a song that I composed some time ago about a man on the DL whom I defied to admit that the kisses that he would give me or that I would give him were somehow tantamount, if not superior, to the ones he received from his own wife and children. And this really just seductress type of defiance that I take from my own background, from my own history, my own beautifully cultured and vibrant ancestry, and pushing that forward in a way that is sexually liberated. And again, as I keep saying over and over, possibility. To me, possibility is really such a strong foundation that I take pride on standing on so often. So
thank you so much, Dorian, for sharing so much that I find so resonant for me as a non-binary person, and also as somebody who I think saw you perform and immediately sort of felt really attuned to the way that you so sort of like unflinchingly confront and embrace seduction. So we'd love to share with the audience now a brief clip from Baisa.
When I was a kid, I fantasized about this moment. What would it be like to give myself to someone, like a warrior, laying my body on the line, besides the warning, besides the fear, a ceremony, my skin burning against yours, burning, burning. And maybe they are right. Maybe we are all doomed. But in moments like this, everything feels natural.
So I would love for you to just talk to us a little bit about what the collaborative process meant for this project and for you as an artist.
Thank you so much. It was really such a fluid process as we talk about gender fluidity, and certainly in the idea of exchanging fluids and throwing ourselves into the idea of fluidity. There was something so magical that we tapped into in what began as a very basic concept of a hookup inside a motel room. And of course, based on, my own past experiences when I would have sex with, men on the DL, and it would take place inside these motel rooms, safe spaces. And what I wanted to really demonstrate, and in bringing in all these wonderful collaborators as well, as Jesus and Yosimar, if you both have mentioned, the idea of rising above the shame and the stigma that comes along with that, and being able to own these experiences as, because they're happening in secret, it is really the fault of a systemic type of oppression that we have all endured for a very, very long time. But it really is a decision that we make in that moment, whether to adopt that and absorb that. And I instead, along with whomever I was engaged in this act with, decided to make it a moment of pleasure and softness and tenderness and healing. And I wanted to really share that experience with Paisa, and never in a way to, even shame these men who come into these situations and clearly have the upper hand in society, have this overwhelming privilege, even though it's all being manifested from a cage. They do hold a very tight and oppressive fist over the rest of us in many ways. And yet many of these men were migrants. Many of these men were working class. So to me, was like, this is the possibility that we are embodying in this moment, where they can take away something that could possibly make them grow in a specific way. They can also take with them the lesson of softness, and how softness can be empowering, how softness can be us giving thanks to our ancestors, and how it can be something that can embolden us and strengthen us, and how we can push softness and tenderness and consideration, into our communities. In the end, it is a celebration of brown pleasure, a celebration of brown seduction, of brown sensuality, and owning that, and how that is a communication with our ancestors, our transcestors in that very moment.
Thank you, Dorian. My next question for you is, like, in the piece, particularly, you also talk about chosen family and the significance and the importance of that. What is chosen family to you, and how has that been something that has guided your own art practice in your own life?
Well, I think that actually speaks a lot to what you had mentioned earlier about, at times feeling lost. And when we feel lost, we find that we forge our own paths, and those paths are very lonely. And what I've discovered in my own path is that all families chosen. Everything, like blood family, not blood family, we choose who we want to keep in our lives. And we all come from different backgrounds. We all come from specific traumas that have to do with our blood ancestry. But something I've noticed, that as queer people, our ancestors and transcestors come from all sorts of places. The ones that have paved the way for us don't necessarily have to share the same bloodline as we do. And I think that is what makes us truly magical.
Before you go, Dorian, one thing that Yosimar mentioned at the beginning of the evening was that in many ways tonight is a kind of vision board for the kind of queer world and queer future we want to build. And so before you go, we'd love for you to maybe just give the space, in brief, if you'd like, one vision or one hope that you would like to contribute towards a more queer future, a more queer world for Latinx folks.
Thank you. If I may, I'd like to actually impart a certain type of anger that I feel could really mobilize us. And I know in a lot of self-care, we try to shed anger. And in this moment, I would like to embody it as a way of healing, as a way of moving forward, by sharing a lyric from a song that I composed called Segua, based on the legend of La Segua from Costa Rica, a woman that was transformed into a creature that is half woman, half horse for being promiscuous in her village, is how the legend goes. So I take the legend of La Segua in this song, and I draw strength from it. So I'd like to share this lyric. Dime que no he existido, que lo mío es desde ahora. Dime que no tengo sitio si he vivido tierra y mar, y que te sangra la conciencia por hacerte el ignorante, y que pierdan la potencia los anzuelos de tu voz. Thank you so much.
Dorian, where can we find more of your work?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Dorian Wood Music.
Thank you so much, Dorian. Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros.
Gracias a ti.
As we continue our lineup, one of the things that we also want to highlight within the study is that anti-immigrant sentiments and laws affect Latinx men's health, the fear of deportation, and the lack of culturally responsive medical care that we have as a result can deter many queer Latinx men from seeking medical attention and resources. In thinking about legacies of silence, migration, and the body, we would like to think of no better artist to engage with than Jose Villalobos.
So Jose Villalobos is an artist based in Texas and is known for protesting culturally accepted traits of toxic masculinity through performance installations, sculpture, drawings, and fashion. Villalobos grew up on the US-Mexico border in El Paso, so shout out to the 915, and was raised in a traditional conservative family. His work reconciles the identity challenges in his life, caught in between traditional Mexican and American customs. Jose is a delight and inspiration, and somebody who we would love to invite into the space now. So Jose, welcome.
Thank you so much. This is very special to be part of this conversation. My work touches base on this idea of men's health, but in a specific, this toxic masculinity and this machismo that exists, right? And how do we tear this down? How do we start to accept that it is okay to be femme, or it is okay to be soft, and all these different ideas. But I try to soften the virility that exists in a specific object, a object that has carried a very masculine and very powerful type of power, right? Like as simple as a sombrero and how it's worn, and the idea of how it's carried through as a performance in these men and their masculinity, right? And tearing it down, it's it's like this idea of the way I do it is kind of subvert that, and I protest it, because we have to. For me, it took me a very long time to accept that that I was gay and that it was okay. That there's a lot of questions that still go that go unanswered, and that does affect our mental health, right? And that also kind of triggers something that I'm currently working with in my work, is this idea of resistance masculinity, right? Of how masculinity is used to resist any form of softness or any form of femininity that may exist in mannerisms or in things that you may present yourself or that you like. And this is also because of like the region of where I grew up, right? And where I was raised. So, growing up in the border in Ciudad Juarez and El Paso, it is a complete different dynamic, right? All of these things that kind of surround is kind of what informs, how to be, how to act, how to exist, right? And through carried on traits, there's these old traditions and culturally accepted traits that kind of just stay, and they stay stagnant. And a lot of it, I think, happens also is because as soon as they make it into the US land, they stay where they're at because that is the safest space, right? Going beyond other borders is it becomes more dangerous, right? There's other checkpoints, there's other, you're putting yourself at a risk of a lot of things. So what ends up happening is como que se va creciendo esa colonia y la existencia de esa gente de la cultura, de las tradiciones, again, it just stays, right? And it starts to grow, and it kind of ferments, right? And when for me, it was tough, it was tough to understand that I was gay. Like, I felt there was a point in time that I felt so messed up mentally that I had to seek church and I had to get baptized, and I got baptized twice because I felt so messed up, right? Like, you should not go through that. So, you know, in my work, I try to touch base on that, and I try to bring in these ideas too of like of confronting them, right? Presenting these things and confronting. It becomes confrontational for the person, for the viewer, right? And also at times creating it. It's all based off of that, because masculinity is something that is forced upon us, especially for men, right? And yeah, you know, and when it's forced on us, all we know what to do is we know how to repeat that cycle. Like, when does that cycle break? And it sometimes it takes us um, a self-realization too, you know, to cut ties with all this toxic environment, right? And to not be hurt anymore, and to not be doing all these things that are hurting others as well, you know. And it kind of, that's where the chosen family comes into play as well, right? This is when we choose our family, a family that's going to love us for who we are, who's going to support us, who's going to help us carry through with our, you know, whatever baggage we may have, right? In this specific video, what I do is I kind of, you know, I went back to El Paso, and I crossed the Rio Grande, and it's kind of like also seeing how the border is used as how it's used as a weapon, right? Ultimately.
I'll say that, I mean, I just think like the work is so striking, and I just think like that I think like this particular piece for me was just watching the entirety of it was just really, really outstanding. And I would love for you to maybe talk to us a little bit about the role of risk and what it means to crack open the archive inside of your work. I think so much of your work speaks to breaking silence, I think on a personal level, but also like historical.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I put myself at risk every time, especially when I perform. You know, like physical risk will exist, and would it's pretty funny because when I did that performance, I sliced right into my nose bridge, and I could have like almost gone blind. But it's important to take risk, because if we don't take it, when will be the time to talk about these important things, right? So I think risk has its beautiful outcomes, right? And I think from risk we can all learn, right? That is something that just exists. So ultimately, you know, it's a little bit scary at times to talk about such things, right? To talk about myself or talk about these histories, right? That people kind of bury, and they keep bearing it, right? And to bring that forward and to talk about it is it can be a little scary, because we live in a space that is not so very safe. As much as we call it a safe space, that safe space can be it can be intruded, right? And it can be broken. And yeah, I think for me, it's I want to, me personally, myself, by staying silent for so long, I think for me, why it's important is that it is important for my voice as a queer brown man to be heard, right? This is why I use my work as a tool to do that. And, and when I do have, the ability to do so, I'm able to talk about those queer voices that once existed but were buried, right? That maybe we know of them, but they just, we know of, some of the queer voices that are, that are very iconic, right? And this is who we hear of for the most part. But what about all the other queer individuals that were part of very important parts of history that we never talk about? We're always talking about Frida Kahlo and Chavela Vargas and icons, but I'm like, okay, now let's really start digging, let's really start getting into other work. We need to do that work. And when we don't take that risk, then we're kind of complicit, and we're just kind of letting it be as is, right? And when we start exposing these other things and bringing these things forward, I think is what is important, because there is, the working class, or these specific individuals that were doing this that were also queer.
Really lovely. Thank you so much. If people wanted to slide in your DMs, where can they find you and see more of your work as well?
Yeah, so I'm also on Instagram. That's like my go-to Instagram. I'm just under Jose Villalobos Art. Also my website, it's the same thing, josevillalobosart.com. But yeah, you can definitely, anyone can definitely reach out to me if any questions or any concerns. Ahí les contesto.
And before you go, is there a vision for queer world making that you want to leave us with?
I think what I strive for ultimately is for one to feel safe within their self, right? We understand that we can't control everything around us, but if we can feel safe, mentally, emotionally, if we're able to accept ourselves for who we are, I think that is what creates a better outcome, and it allows us to grow.
Great. Muchas gracias, Jose. Thank you so much for being here with us. Tonight, we continue to return to the importance of finding resonance in identity and language when it comes to creating networks of care with and for one another. It is important for Latinx men to see their language, histories, and health practices valued by their communities. To quote a participant in the Here As I Am report, the future of our community should entail everyone coming together, supporting, and just investing in each other's future. And with that finding, I will let Jesus introduce our next artist.
So as we were thinking about that particular finding and that idea of finding resonance in identity and language when it comes to creating networks of care, I could think of no one better to sort of take up this particular torch than Miguel Gutierrez. Miguel Gutierrez is one of the girls. She's a choreographer, music artist, a writer, educator, based in Lenape, Brooklyn. Miguel's practice and performances investigate identity, politics, Latinx cliches, Western concepts of form, desire, and the search for meaning. I would love to invite you now to talk a little bit about your work, Miguel.
It's a romantic statement, but I do feel like as an artist, my work basically is to do the next thing that is most scary for me to do, right? Is like to engage the next thing that I'm most terrified of trying. This word shame has been brought up several times, and I almost like want to be like, yay, shame, like I want to like put a like a, sign up for shame, because shame, while it can be absolutely terrible, of course. But for me, shame was and continues to be, unfortunately, a portal into the interior. You know, like shame becomes a way for me to like go inward and navigate that really challenging internal architecture of feeling. And I feel like my work is me unraveling that process over and over and over and over by, you know, and it's like, it's almost like it doesn't matter the subject matter. Like I don't have a single subject matter in my work, which is both very frustrating to me sometimes, because I would love to be able to put it in one very sexy sentence in an artist statement. So my artist statement always sounds very kind of like, woo, because it's like I'm doing lots of different things because I'm really interested in lots of different things, but I'm sort of looking behind the thing, not because I have some sort of humanistic idea that we're all the same. No es eso, but it's more like I think there's always something behind the thing. There's always a shadow to the presence, right? There's always some sort of other story that's happening. And I think that, you know, again, shame, right? Shame is this kind of experience of subcutaneous, subterranean emotional life. And I think that when I was young and I was a queer kid growing up in my, Colombian family, there was a whole conversation I'm having with myself that I am not having with the room. Like it is a whole thing that's going on inside, you know, and it's incredibly private. And yes, there's shame, but it's also intimate. Like it's incredibly intimate, you know, like literally my entire childhood and even adulthood, I would say, has been like one constant like disidentification like maze. You know, like finding myself in things that don't at all look like me. Like that's the work I'm doing, you know, contending with all of that feeling of push, pull, push, pull.
So I'd love for us to take a look at some of your work and for the audience to also get to know some of your work. So we'll be watching a brief clip from Age and Beauty Part 1. So I am fascinated by this particular performance, specifically because there was a YouTube interview about this particular performance where you say the easiest way to notice the difference between two people is to make them do the exact same thing. One of the things that I'm constantly sort of thinking about, especially as you know, we're talking about the Here As I Am report and queerness, you know, writ large, is intergenerational conversations. So I would love to hear you maybe talk a little bit about what conversations we are and aren't having, and why that might be, and maybe how your work speaks to intergenerational conversations about queerness, specifically for Latinx folks.
So going into making Age and Beauty, there was a lot of like this shadow of death over the whole trilogy. It's three different pieces. You know, this feeling of like watching yourself sort of get older. You know, I both really want to honor the past and continue to excavate it, but I'm not into nostalgia. you know? And so sometimes I feel like there can be a thing with some generations where like, you know, there's a kind of a desire to turn towards some sort of perception of maybe like an uncomplicated origin point or an uncomplicated past. And I just don't, I feel very confused by that. But at the same time, something about dancing alongside someone, you know, again, we kind of like occupied this gallery space at the Whitney. We turned it into a theater space. One of the things I love to do is to like fool people into feeling like they're invited. And then once I have them, I can do something with them and make them wonder, wait, was this an invitation actually? Like, do I belong here? You know, and I think that's an interesting thing about presence. I think it's an interesting thing about sharing space with people. I think that performance, like that can be a useful discomfort.
One of the things that Wood questions that I had in this bridge called My Ass, we are explicitly encountering identity politics and Latinx cliches. And as we talk about the comfort of building community along culturally affirming work, I wonder if you could speak to what you found in that process and that performance.
Yeah, I mean, in that process, I brought together a group of artists who were sort of working in the experimental vein, who identify as Latinx. And I was kind of intentionally lumping together the lumped, you know, Latinx, let's put us, you know, what do we share literally anything other than the fact that like that particular group of people, we were bilingual. So we would sort of have these arguments and discussions about like, what is it that we share? And like, what's special about us compared to any other minoritarian group or, you know, so, and then I would be like, okay, cool, conversation's over. And then we would move together for like an hour improvising. And I would just observe what we were doing together. And it was things like covering each other, exchanging things, transforming things, passing alongside each other, crossing through, like, and I just started writing down all the things we were just doing. So I was like, let me reverse engineer identity. It was I'll be honest with you, I don't have like a final thesis statement of like, well, Latinidad is, you know, we all know there's a lot of criticism around even that idea and that term for all sorts of reasons, issues of race and especially, right? But for me, it was like, there's a system here. There's a system that emerged between us. There's a form of communication, and it's also like, it's invisible.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Miguel. Can you let us know where we can find your work? And before you leave, your vision for a queer world.
Yeah, so you can find me like literally everywhere. So I have my website, miguelgutierrez.org. And I have, I'm on Instagram at a boy like that. And I also have my handle of Are You for Sale podcast also on Instagram. Gracias.
And your vision for...
my vision.
Yes.
My vision. I have to blur my vision to have a vision. I just think like a complicated togetherness, like a togetherness that allows for complexity, a togetherness that doesn't presume that we all have to be the same. Like wrangling with that, like really wrangling with it, actually. Not because I want to create conflict or in this vision of a future, but because conflict's already there. So we have to learn how to deal.
Great. Muchas gracias, Miguel. Thank you so much for being here with us. As we are coming towards the closing of tonight's event, I would like to introduce to you my co-host, Jesus Valles, who also is a dynamic performer, poet. Jesus' work explores the intersections of migration, celebrates sexuality, and uplifts just how dynamic and badass we all are. I think his performance will definitely close us out into what we hope that tonight is to all of you. A reminder that we are all in this in a complicated togetherness, and that we are here to, you know, creating our families. So please help me welcoming the amazing Jesus Valles.
Thank you so much, Yosimar. What I'll be sharing tonight is a lyric essay. I'm kind of obsessed with quinceañeras and everything I've learned from them. And so this is a piece about quinceañeras, queerness, and in many ways, ancestry and family. So, quinceañera. It was always my obsession with things that look soft and aren't. Tools, crinoline, starch taffeta, the textures of all the things I've always thought most beautiful amidst the dirt. It was every princess fantasy I ever had as a boy, everything glimmering and flowing and rough, everything tightened and gorgeous and boned into its silks. It was the picture of my sister Jessica from her quinceañera, the white-brimmed white hat and the gloves, and how dumb this 15-year-old looked in a white-brimmed white hat. Like, girl, why? Jessica's quince was a thing of dirt and ingenuity. Jessica at 15 was beautiful and rough, like the tulle and the wire and the hoop skirts and the pins that come undone in the fitting. My mother insisted that she have damas for her quince, but she refused to share the spotlight with anyone but her wild, queerly beloved, her crew, her ride or dies, los jotitos de la vecindad. For her birthday, they gifted her a move-by-move recreation of Madonna's Vogue performance from the VMAs. Adan, Saul, La Chuya, Claudia, Martin, all dressed in black, parted the sea of guests, cleared the dance floor, the dirt road that led to all our homes in Juarez, and began. Even as a child, I thought, my God, this magic, to turn dirt into a dance floor, to turn yourself into a diva in the dust, my God, to be that fabulous. You ever seen Jotos dance in sand and wind? Glimmering tornadoes dressed in the air with perra and loca. So unlike the men my father drank with at parties, quiet and still and aloof until they were 3 beers in. No, my sister Jessica's friends, Adan, La Chuya, Martin, Claudia, Saul, bolts of lightning who took each other in with the care we owe our flesh. Gentle jabs at each other between dance steps. They taught me everything I know about being too much when you're living in the teeth of risk. Adan was beautiful in a way that made my mother envious. This breathtaking femininity, a delicate, brave dazzle of flowing hair and 2 glossed lips in our desert city, bright and furious until government negligence made what it made of his blood. La Chuya was loud and mustached and sissy and limp-wristed and exagerada. And mostly, I remember her leaning to listen to whatever hurt you when you needed it most. Then he left too. Then Martin, who was quiet, loving, and deeply devoted to his family, who provided haircuts for everyone in the neighborhood, attempting to make our little Juarez more beautiful, even as his hands grew thinner and thinner, until eventually they disappeared. Claudia was the muscle of the operation, tough and beer drunk often, and whenever anyone would utter, pinches jotos, it was Claudia who would be the first to offer a fist to the offender. Claudia wasn't playing around, she still doesn't. She, unlike some of them, is still alive. So is Saul, who remains as timeless as he was when I was a child, the perfectly coiffed, pockmarked, sharp-tongued madam of the group. Saul ran the girls and was as much a mother as anyone could be. Opened his home when the group needed it and fed folks when stomachs railed against the meager bellies they hid behind. Saul brought the best music and led every choreography and always, always, always offered to marry my older brother because he was a baseball player and, well, she didn't need any other reason. These 5 queer people in Ciudad Juarez were always proof of how we keep each other alive. We make families of one another. We teach each other to survive, to perform, to laugh, to listen, to embrace, to continue. I was brought to this country in the entrails of a truck in hopes that I'd have a better life than what I might have had in Juarez. Lucky Jotita that I was, these queer ancestors smuggled themselves in my marrow, angels of sand and invention who whispered to me in their dance, you will need to be brave for what is ahead. That does not mean you have to be hard. Courage should not make you stone. Courage in its truest form allows you to flow in gusts and currents take in everything the world can throw at you, turn it into something beautiful, like the tulle and crinoline and taffeta of that quinceañera dress. How glorious. We who have already lost so many are still here, alive for one another, humbled in each other's breath, held in their spirits. It is the only way. The world is undoing itself every day. Who better equipped than us, who know how to turn tragedy into jubilation, who know how to care for each other without the contract of blood to love one another, that real love, that good love, that true love that risks, that real love that is dangerous and that says, you are my world. Our answers have always been at the bars, at the kickbacks, in our beds, in our cookouts, at our drag shows, at the parade, at the cruising ground, in our living rooms, at our quinces, here in this room. The answer has always been us. There are no chosen ones. There is only the revolutionary act of choosing each other every day. May we continue the work of our ancestors to mourn our dead and fight like hell for the living. Adelante.
Girl, oh, Chillona, right here. Thank you so much, Jesus. Thank you so much for closing us out with that beautiful, beautiful piece. I'm all teary-eyed. Pero before we close out, I definitely want to thank Dorian, Miguel, Jose, Jesus. Thank you so much for honestly this space and seeing the way you create and the way that you continue to envision spaces for us. It feels way better, right? It feels, again, the possibilities. So I just want to express my deepest gratitude for joining us. And it feels amazing to share this existence with all of you. And I'm hopeful for the queer future that comes after us. And yeah, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah, I really am filled with gratitude today, and I want to thank, of course, ViiV Healthcare for their support and for everything that they've done to allow this show to happen, and specifically to bring us in the space together. In many ways, there are conversations that I wanted to have with you all tonight that that we don't have time for, and that we wish we did. And I think the conversations we did have tonight and what we've shared in this space, I think, are part of that rehearsing the future that we want to live in. And I'm so proud and honored to have co-hosted with Yosimar, who I see as such a guiding figure for me, and to be here with Miguel and Dorian and Jose, who are all people who I consider living ancestors. So thank you all so much for everything that you give so generously, not only to this space, but to the world at large. Aquí seguimos.
Seguimos. Muchas gracias. And now we're going to pass it off to PJ for some closing remarks. Muchas gracias. Que pasen buenas noches.
Thank you to our co-hosts, Yosimar and Jesus. And thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. We're truly grateful. For more information on tonight's event and other activities from ViiV Healthcare's Positive Action for Latinx Men, an initiative for gay, bisexual, and trans men, please visit us online or follow ViiV Healthcare on social media. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.